Newsmaker Sunday with Fox 10's John Hook.
Thanks for joining us on Newsmaker Sunday. This week, our guest is a mother whose son gave the ultimate sacrifice for this country. Debbie Lee's son, Mark, was the first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq, in Ramadi, on August 2nd, 2006, coming up on a 9-year anniversary of losing her son. The chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, Martin Dempsey, recently said that the loss of Ramadi was not symbolic in any way. And that cut to the quick and to the heart of these families of young men who gave their lives in Iraq, in Ramadi, to try to further the U.S. cause and try to slow terrorism. And so it really, really upset them. And Debbie Lee responded in kind, and she is our guest this week on Newsmaker Sunday. Thanks for being with us.
You bet. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for Mark's service. So sorry for his loss.
Thank you. I miss that young man very much, but I am so proud of him and the sacrifice that he chose to make so that you and I can enjoy the freedoms that we wake up and enjoy every single morning. I do know where that young man is. He was redeployed to heaven. I will see him again one day. But until then, I chose to put on his boots and pick up his weapon and stay in the fight for our troops and their families, because I do understand who pays the price for that freedom.
He was prominently featured in Chris Kyle's book, American Sniper.
Yes, Chris was with Mark when he died. In the book, he talks about Mark, tells his heroic story, says, I had to step over my teammate and continue in the fight. And
you met Chris before?
I met Chris. Chris and I were very, very close. So it was a double whammy losing him. But again, we carry on for those young men. The story that he wrote in his book is absolutely amazing, as it shows both sides of war. It shows what was going on with the family back home. It shows what he was dealing with in combat. It shows the bond of the brotherhood, which is unlike anything else I've ever seen in my life. And he dedicated the book to Mark and to Ryan Job, and he tells Mark's story. There's pictures of Mark in there. And the end of the book, he talks about a woman who became like a surrogate mom to the team guys.
That's you.
And he talks about our foundation and what we're continuing to do. And I was blessed
That's
to have
the Mighty
Chris
Warrior Project,
yes,
right?
America's Mighty Warriors,
America's Mighty Warriors program. I want to take you back. You did an interview with our Jill Monier. And I want to take you back just for our viewers to take a look at that. And then we'll talk about this, what happened with Martin Dempsey, your letter to him, his apology back. Here's Jill Monier.
And this is actually the dirt from the bottom of the sign at the base that was named after Mark, Camp Mark Lee in Ramadi, Iraq.
Debbie Lee's son Mark was the first Navy SEAL killed in Ramadi in 2006. She was floored when she says she heard General Martin Dempsey in a news conference last week respond to reports that Ramadi, Iraq is on the verge of an Islamic State by describing Ramadi as, quote, not symbolic in any way.
When I heard those comments, you could have sucker punched me and knocked me down. It was so painful to hear that, to know the sacrifices that had been made in Ramadi.
Debbie wrote an open letter to the general calling for an apology, saying, quote, my son and many others gave their future in Ramadi. You, sir, will not minimize the sacrifice my son Mark Lee made or any of our brave warriors. Then Monday, the general responded with a letter back to Lee, saying in part, quote, I do apologize if I've added to your grief. The letter went on to say, quote, we are in a different fight now with a different enemy and with a different relationship with the government of Iraq. They must determine the path and pace of this fight. That's what I intended to convey.
And General Dempsey actually called and talked to me for close to 15 minutes today.
What did he say?
Oh, just reiterates the apology, you know, that he was sorry, that he really does care about the families, really does care about the troops. And he hoped I would accept his apology. And I said I did forgive him. I did tell General Dempsey when I spoke with him today that I think he needs to publicly make that apology. It's not just me. I didn't do this just for my son. There's so many others that were hurt by that.
Debbie Lee, mother of Mark Lee, who was the first Navy SEAL killed in Ramadi on August 2nd, 2006, is our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. You've been there twice. Tell me about that place, obviously now in control of ISIS. President calls it ISIL, but ISIS. Tell me what you've observed there. What did you see?
Yeah, my first trip I went over was Christmas 2007. So they had just started to make a huge difference in Ramadi. I spent the majority of my time in Baghdad. We were stationed, embedded with the 1st to the 4th Cav, and so we were at Fob Falcon, which was in the southern part of Baghdad. But I did get to take a flight over to Camp Mark Lee, got to visit there. As you saw in the report, brought back some of the soil from the ground by the sign there.
How did you even arrange this? Did the military help you facilitate this, to go see, to be there where your son died? That's why you went, right?
We had collected 226,000 Christmas cards, and I wanted to personally take those to the troops. I wanted to personally love on our men and women over there on behalf of all the other moms, all the other families who couldn't go over there and do that. And so I went over and was embedded with the 1st to the 4th Cav and was able to do that. We shipped most of the cards to the different bases in Iraq and Afghanistan, but actually got to hand deliver 10,000 of those cards, spend Christmas with our troops.
We're watching that some of the video of that area. Just your impression, how were we doing in 2010 there?
2010, it was huge, the difference that was made. We didn't even have troops going outside of the wire. We had secured the area so well. It's still a combat zone, so there were still things going on. But Mark talked in his last letter home. He says, we will get Iraq to stand on its own 2 feet. It will take longer than most think, but we will make that happen. I got to see that happen. I got to see the stability, the change in the country, the hope for that country that was there. And it was amazing, the difference. We couldn't even find anyone to go outside of the wire. When I went over in 2007, we went out 3 different times into the door neighborhoods with the Army, but there wasn't anybody even going outside of the wire in 2010. We flew from Baghdad and did a change of command into Crit with the Army and the Iraqis that were working together to set up the Iraqi Air Force. But other than that, there really wasn't a lot going on.
So give me the kind of difference from 2007 to 2010. What changed in that period from when you were there the first time to the second time?
I would say what changed was the way that the neighborhoods were secured, the way that the Iraqis had stepped up to help fight. They were beginning to, the training was starting to impact and set in. I remember talking to Mark in one of our phone calls, and I said, what's taking so long to train them? He said, Mom, they don't even know their left hand from their right hand. I had a preschool for 15 years, and that's one of the basic things. So when they were giving them instructions through the interpreter, telling them put your, put the scope on your right hand of your face or use your right hand, it was difficult. So some of those things that we can't even comprehend would be so basic and so simple. It took a while to do that.
Did he feel they were not committed to the cause?
I think
was he always doubtful?
It depended on who you were working with. I think what I saw over there was some of the loyalty issues. It is so hard for us as Americans to understand, unless you've been to a third world country, how depraved and what basic things they have. And I remember the reporting that was going on saying, that country's in ruins. They only have, electricity for 4 hours a day. That was what was an upgrade for them. A lot of them, just even when it wasn't combat, didn't have that. So the reporting and what we were getting was entirely different. I saw how grateful a lot of the Iraqis were over there and heard personally them thanking Americans and thanking our troops for what they'd done.
Mark grew up here in the Valley. You've got 2 other sons, is that right?
I have a son and a daughter.
A son and a daughter.
He actually grew up in Oregon, was where Mark grew up. I moved down here in 2004 and was going back and forth between Oregon and here. Permanently moved here in 2005 when my oldest son got out of the Marines.
He was a Marine also.
Yes.
Why did Mark deploy? Why did he enlist?
Well, I think definitely had a love for our country. It meant a lot to him. My oldest son, Christopher, went in the Marines in August of 2000. My son-in-law, Christopher, went in the Army in October of 2000. And I think there was definitely some competition between the boys.
Healthy competition between brothers.
Healthy competition.
Yeah, I know about that.
Mark went in May 2001, went into the Navy, and obviously went in with a contract to try out to be a Navy SEAL. It doesn't guarantee you'll be a Navy SEAL.
Sure.
You have to pass BUDS, but was good enough to go directly there from his basic training.
Can you read part of the last letter that he wrote to you? Mark wrote to you. This would have been dated when?
This actually would have been about 9 years ago. It was the middle part of July. I don't remember the exact date.
Just weeks before he would die.
Weeks before he would die. And literally, this letter has changed lives and continues to change lives around the world. And this is part of his legacy. And I would encourage your listeners to go to our website and read the entire letter.
What is the website?
The website is americasmightywarriors.org.
Okay, americasmightywarriors.org, and that letter will be there.
That letter will be there.
Can you read a little bit of it for us, the parts you feel are pertinent?
You bet.
It's all pertinent.
He starts it out, glory is something that some men chase, and others find themselves stumbling on, not expecting it to find them. Either way, it is a noble gesture that one finds bestowed upon them. My question is, when does glory fade away and become a wrongful crusade or an unjustified means which consumes one completely? I've seen war. I've seen death. The sorrow that encompasses your entire being as a man breathes his last. I can only pray and hope that none of you will ever have to experience some of the things I've seen and felt here. I've seen amazing things happen here. I've seen the sad part of war, too. I've seen the morals of a man who cares nothing of human life. I've seen the hate towards a nation's people who's never committed a wrong, except being born of a third world, ill-educated and ignorant to Western civilization. Our country is a great country. Don't get me wrong on this. Otherwise, none of us would be living there. My point of this is, how can we come over here and help a less than fortunate country without holding contempt or hate towards them if we can't do it in our own country? I try to do my part over here, but the truth is, over there in the United States, I do nothing but take. Ask yourself, when was the last time you donated clothes that you hadn't worn out? When was the last time you paid for a random stranger's cup of coffee, a meal, or maybe even a tank of gas? When was the last time you helped a person with their groceries into or out of their car? Think to yourself and wonder what it would feel like if, when the bill for the meal came and you were told it was already paid for. More random acts of kindness like this would change our country and our reputation as a country.
Let me stop you for a moment. He was, it's beautifully written, and you homeschooled him.
I did, yes.
That's your handiwork.
Well, I'm not sure that I felt like it was handiwork at the time. Mark was very intelligent. Obviously, the Navy SEALs, when they're doing their mixture of dive and stuff, they have to have chemistry. There's a lot of things they need to know.
Cut through that. You know him. You're his mom.
Yes.
Cut through that and tell me what's going on in his brain.
I think what was going on in his brain is he very much saw a contrast between America and between what was going on over there.
The haves and have-nots.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think he saw the price firsthand for our freedom. I don't think he obviously didn't know at that point he was going to end up giving his life. But the blessings that we do have in America, the great country that we do live in, he talks about we have an obligation to keep it that way. Mm-hmm. And so he was changed. He was knowing going back home, he was going to be living a different life.
You saw him last when?
The last time I saw him would have been the week before he deployed. Would have been the end of March, 9 years ago. 2006. And his birthday was March 20th. We had actually taken him to one of the spring training games just down the street from where I live. And I had to put up, happy birthday, have a safe deployment.
We see this in American Sniper clearly in the movie. Did you see the same thing with Mark when he would come home and he's out of battle and he's suddenly transported to La La Land and he's going to a spring training game? This is almost an impossible thing to transition.
For most of our men and women, it definitely is. Unfortunately, we didn't get to see that transition. This was Mark's first deployment.
That was the first, that was right before he left for the first time.
Yes, it was just before he left.
So he had not been deployed before that?
He had not been deployed. And I remember standing on my lawn after he'd been here for 4 or 5 days and saying goodbye, giving hugs. And as he got in that car and drove away, my other son was standing there next to me. And I am not a worrier, I'm not a fretter, that is just not my personality. Mm-hmm. But I knew that that was the last time I was going to see Mark. And I looked over at my son, Christopher, and I said, I don't feel good about this.
Wow.
And he said, neither do I, Mom. He's like me, not a worrier, not a fretter. But I just knew. And I don't know if that was God's way trying to prepare me. I don't know how you ever prepare for receiving the news that your child has been killed, because that's the most devastating thing you could ever go through.
We'll take a break right there. Back with Debbie Lee. Her son, Mark Lee, was the first Navy SEAL killed in Ramadi in Iraq on August 2nd, 2006. We're back with more with Debbie right after this. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Debbie Lee. Debbie's son, Mark, was the first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq in Ramadi on August 2nd, 2006. The 9-year anniversary is approaching. As we told you in the first part of the program, Debbie was quite taken aback when Martin Dempsey, the Joint Chiefs of Staff, chairman of the Joint Chiefs, said that Iraq is on the verge of becoming an Islamic State, basically, and had said that the fall of Ramadi was not symbolic in any way after her son gave his life on that soil along with so many other American fighting men. She's our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. Martin Dempsey, I want to play a clip of Martin Dempsey here for a minute. He was apologetic. He did call you. He did write to you, right?
He did.
Both?
Yes, I received a letter and about a 15-minute phone call.
You were first told, though, that they weren't going to take it back when he said that.
Yeah, I had actually wrote the letter Friday morning, and then Saturday morning it did get to the Pentagon on Friday. Saturday morning I received a phone call from the PAO just talking to me, telling me a little bit more about General Dempsey, how much he loved the troops, but that an apology probably would not be coming.
Let me play that clip from Martin Dempsey, chairman of the Joint Chiefs.
We've got $1 trillion, that's a T, not a B, $1 trillion less in budget authority over 10 years. We've said from the beginning, it's a disaster.
That didn't pertain to the Ramadi comment, but I think he was talking about funding for the military, perhaps. When he called you, what did you say to him when he first picked up the phone? Because he knew you were steamed over that comment.
Right.
It demeaned the loss of your son.
It did. And as he apologized to me, he explained what he meant to say or what he was trying to say, and what he told me was that he was trying to say it wasn't significant or symbolic to ISIS. Obviously, if you're Ramadi, if you're a general, you better believe that the words that come out of your mouth better say exactly what you intend to say. And I did tell him that I disagreed with his point in the apology letter, saying that it was a different enemy, a different fight. I do believe it's the same enemy. I do believe it's the same fight. They've taken a different name, a little different strategy or tactics, but this is the same thing that we have seen go on. And I definitely believed that there was symbolism. It was significant. I reiterated to him the sacrifice of my son, the sacrifice of so many others. In 2006, the majority of our casualties were coming from Ramadi. We have so many of our troops that have come back.
Zone.
It was. Mark's teammates said it was the hellhole of Iraq, or the worst piece of real estate over there.
And that's where these guys, the highly trained,
Yes.
highly skilled, went right in.
They did, and they made a huge difference over there. But I do think it is important to ISIS. Their strategy is to go and take as much country as they can, and we're seeing that continue to this day.
You believe if we had stayed over there with some fashion of presence of troops, we could have prevented this? You
That
believe that in
ISIS
your heart of
flag
hearts?
would not be flying over Ramadi today if we had left troops there to stabilize the area. We saw the transition that was being made. We saw Iraq becoming more secure, and then we yanked everybody out, and it just left a vacuum in there for the terrorists to come back in and for the issues to be there.
I know you can't speak for everybody who's enlisted, but do you think that's a feeling that's pretty widespread within the military on the front lines?
Yes, I do believe that's. I've talked to a lot of our troops. I've talked to a lot of Mark's teammates, and they feel the same way.
That we quit?
Well, our troops did not quit.
Right.
But the
We walked away.
strategies and the policies were lacking to let them be successful.
Can I
over
read
there.
you, well, let me start actually with you. I printed out your letter you sent to Martin Dempsey. Give me, read a paragraph, if you will, of your letter to him that you think most encapsulates your feelings about what he had said.
Yeah. The city itself is not symbolic in any way. Oh, really? Are you willing to meet with me and with the families who've lost a son, a daughter, a husband, a wife, a father, a mother, aunt, uncle, grandson, or teammate? My son, Mark Lee, was the first Navy SEAL who sacrificed his life in Ramadi, Iraq, 2006. His blood is still in that soil and forever will be. Remember, that was when so many of our loved ones were taken from us. I talked about the others who'd left their body parts there. I talked about me visiting that area and seeing what I said. And then I said, you, sir, owe an apology to the families whose loved ones' blood was shed in Ramadi. Ramadi matters to us and is very symbolic to us. You need to apologize to our troops whose bodies were blown to pieces from IEDs and bullet holes, leaving parts and pieces behind. Ramadi mattered to them. You need to apologize to our troops who endured the extreme temperatures and battled the terrorists in some of the worst battlefields in Iraq.
Let me read how he responded to you. He said, "I've read your letter. I do apologize if I've added to your grief." He said, "Mark and so many others died fighting to provide a better future for Iraq. He and those with whom he served did all that their nation asked. They won their fight, and nothing will ever diminish their accomplishments, nor the honor in which we hold their service." Was it enough?
As I said here, he apologized to me because I was the one that wrote the letter.
Right.
But he needs to make a public apology to all those families. I do believe that in his heart that I did hear that
Remorse and
yes.
Yeah, contrition.
But I think there was a little bit more that needed to be done publicly, not just to me.
We're taking a break here on Newsmaker Sunday. Debbie Lee, whose son Mark was killed, the first Navy SEAL killed in Iraq. She's our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. We return in just a moment. Back on Newsmaker Sunday with Debbie Lee. Her son Mark died in Iraq, the first Navy SEAL killed in Ramadi on August 2nd, 2006. When the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, Martin Dempsey, said that the loss of Ramadi, where Mark died, was not symbolic in any way, it really upset a lot of parents and loved ones of people who spilled their blood on that soil. Debbie's our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. I want to ask you just quickly, a decade ago, Cindy Sheehan, a Gold Star mom who lost her son in Iraq, got a lot of national attention, camping out, staging protests of the Iraq War near President Bush's ranch in Crawford, Texas. This went on for months. She got a lot of press.
Yes.
Have you gotten that kind of coverage?
No, and actually I'm the first Gold Star mom in history to be in the combat zone where my son died. And you didn't hear any of that when I came back.
Why do you think that is?
Well, I think part of it, because I will speak the truth. I will tell what's going on, what I've seen. I've been down to Gitmo. Again, I wanted to go firsthand and see, and not base it on someone else, not being what we've been told. But I've also always made sure that when I'm out speaking publicly or confronting someone, that it's done maybe with boldness, but with respect and with dignity, and that I will never embarrass my son or any of the other troops by ridiculous things that I would say or do to try to get attention. It's not about getting attention from me.
But do you think that the press has a bias in this area? That there was a cheerleading for the end of the war, which I think nobody wants to see war, but there was a...
I definitely believe that there is a bias in our media. Like I said, I've seen that firsthand. When I went to Iraq, what we were being told on the news that was going on over there, they were taking snippets of those who were speaking out against America. It would be just like us taking Code Pink, the comments they made, broadcasting across the world and say that's how all of Americans believe. That is not how Americans believe. That's not what we feel.
Tell me about the America's Mighty Warriors program.
You bet. I founded it in response to that letter that Mark wrote and accepting his challenge to pass on that.
What are you trying to accomplish with the group?
We've got 4 major things that we do. We want to make sure that our troops and the families of the fallen are taken care of. So we do advocacy. We speak out if there's an issue. They can't be that voice. We can be that for them. We have a house here in Arizona called the Heroes Hope Home, where the families of the fallen can come stay for free for the week, and we love on them and pamper them the entire week and let them know we'll never forget the sacrifices they've made. We do retreats in Texas for our families of the fallen, for our wounded veterans, the Purple Heart recipients, and then we're also paying for hyperbaric oxygen therapy treatments for our troops with PTS, TBI. We're looking at other alternative therapies to help them heal. And then we do those random acts of kindness like Mark talked about in his letter for our troops and for their families.
30 seconds, what's the website?
The website is americasmightywarriors.org, and please go there and find out. You can see all what we're doing, what we've done, what we continue to do.
I always like to ask my guests, what did you learn from this horrible, horrible experience of losing your son in Iraq?
First of all, I learned how precious the gift of our families and our children are to us. But I also learned that you don't need to quit. No matter what comes through you, the toughest difficulties, you continue to be a fighter, you continue to make a difference, and you continue to have hope and continue on.
Thank you. Thank you for Mark's service and his sacrifice for this country.
Thank you.
Good to see you, Debbie. Debbie Lee, our guest on Newsmaker Sunday. We'll see you next week.